The old scholar sat beneath the purple sky of his dying world. His name was Cathara, and he was the last of his kind who remembered the time before humans changed everything. Young aliens gathered around him, their eyes wide with curiosity. They had heard whispers of the human war, but no one spoke of it openly. It was too painful, too shameful. "You want to know about the Deathworlders?" Cathara said, his voice like dry leaves. "Then listen well. Listen, and never forget what our arrogance cost us." He closed his ancient eyes and began to remember. 50 years before the war, humans discovered they were not alone in the universe. The Galactic Concord welcomed them with false smiles and hidden disgust. Humans came from Earth, a planet the galaxy called a death world. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was poison. Predators filled every corner. Disease lived in the very water they drank. That any species could survive such a place seemed impossible. That they could build civilization there seemed like madness. The aliens looked at humans and saw monsters wearing the skin of civilized beings. But humans wanted peace. They wanted friendship. They followed every rule the Concord gave them. They softened their voices. They hid their strength. They smiled when aliens insulted them. They apologized when they had done nothing wrong. For 50 years, humanity wore a mask, desperate to prove they belonged among the stars. Admiral King Teho remembered every insult. He commanded Earth's defense fleet, a small collection of ships the Concord allowed humanity to keep. At diplomatic meetings, alien delegates would laugh at human aggression. It would make jokes about Earth's violent history. Teho would smile and say nothing. But his eyes never smiled. Those who looked closely saw something cold living behind them, something waiting on the border of human space. There was a colony called New Busan. It was a beautiful world of green forests and blue oceans. Over 2 million humans lived there. Families, children, dreams of a future among the stars. Dr. Yoon. Hana worked as a scientist on New Busan. She studied alien biology, trying to find ways humans could better understand their galactic neighbors. Her husband taught music to children in the colony's largest city. Her daughter was 7 years old and loved to paint pictures of spaceships. Her son was 4 and wanted to be a pilot. Every morning, Hannah would kiss them goodbye before leaving for her laboratory on the orbital station above the planet. She did not know that her family had already been sold. Trademaster Oryx was a merchant of the Velahari species. He was fat with wealth and drunk on power. He saw humans as useful animals, nothing more. When the Vrath Dominion approached him with an offer, he did not hesitate. The Vrath were warriors, predators who conquered worlds for sport. They wanted human territory. Oryx wanted profit. He sold them the defense codes for New Busan. The Galactic Concord knew about the deal. High Arbiter Veltham, the leader of the Concord, received reports of the planned attack. He read them carefully. Then he deleted them. Human expansion needed to be controlled, he reasoned. A small tragedy would remind them of their place. The galaxy would express sympathy, offer meaningless words, and move on. On the morning of the attack, Hannah was on the orbital station running experiments. She looked out the window at her beautiful planet. The sky was clear. The forests were green. Everything was peaceful. Then the Varith fleet arrived. 16 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The colony's shields should have activated instantly. They did not. The defense codes had been changed. The shields stayed down. The Viroth opened fire. Hannah watched from the station as fire fell from the sky. She watched the cities burn. She watched the forests turn to ash. She screamed her husband's name. She screamed her children's names. The station's communication systems filled with voices begging for help, crying for mercy, then falling silent one by one. In 6 hours, 2.3 million humans died. Men, women, children, the 4-year-old boy who wanted to be a pilot, the 7-year-old girl who loved to paint, all of them gone. The galaxy watched the footage with mild interest. News programs covered the massacre for one day, then moved on to other stories. Alien politicians expressed their deep concern. The Concord promised an investigation that would never happen. High Arbiter Veltham called it an unfortunate incident and recommended that humans exercise caution in border territories. No one was punished. No one was blamed. 2 million lives became a footnote in galactic history. But Hannah survived. And Hannah remembered she spent weeks digging through data. She bribed officials. She stole classified files. Slowly, she built a case that proved everything. Oryx had sold the codes. The Concord had known. Veltham had let it happen. The massacre was not an accident. It was murder, approved by the highest powers in the galaxy. When she finished gathering evidence, Hannah did not go to the Concord. She did not trust alien justice. Instead, she went to the one human she knew would understand. Admiral Kong Teho received her in his office aboard the flagship, U.S. Resolve. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to her evidence without speaking. He looked at the faces of the dead. He saw the children. Something behind his eyes changed. The cold thing that had been waiting for 50 years finally woke up. "How many copies of this evidence exist?" he asked. 3, Hannah said. "One with me. One with Ambassador No Yunbai. One in a secure location that will release automatically if anything happens to us." Nodded slowly. He stood and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice quiet and terrible. "For 50 years we played their game. We smiled, we apologized. We pretended to be less than we are." He turned to face her. "That ends now." He activated his communication system and sent one message to every human fleet commander in the galaxy. The message contained 2 words: "Assemble. Now." Across human space, ships began to move. Officers who had waited their entire careers for this moment understood immediately. The mask was coming off. The Deathworlders were done playing nice. On the orbital station above the ashes of New Busan, Dr. Yoon Hana looked down at the grave of her family. Tears fell from her eyes, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I will make them remember your names," she whispered. "Every single one of them. I promise." The war had not yet begun. But in that moment, the galaxy's fate was already sealed. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was the largest building ever constructed. It floated in space at the center of the galaxy, a monument to alien civilization. 10,000 species had seats in this chamber. 10,000 flags hung from its walls. For 3,000 years, the Concord had ruled the stars from this place. Ambassador No Yunbai stood at the entrance and felt no fear. She was a small woman with silver hair and calm eyes. She had spent 30 years as a diplomat, smiling at creatures who hated her, negotiating with beings who saw her as an animal. Today, she would smile no more. High Arbiter Veltham sat on his throne at the center of the chamber. He was ancient and proud, with scales that shimmered like gold. He had ruled the Concord for 200 years. In all that time, no species had ever truly challenged him. He looked at the human ambassador the way one might look at an insect. "You requested an emergency audience," Veltham said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Speak quickly. We have important matters to discuss." Yunbai walked to the speaking platform. Around her, thousands of alien delegates watched with bored expressions. Some were already checking their personal devices. Humans were not interesting. Humans were weak. Whatever this woman had to say, it would not matter. "I thank the High Arbiter for his time," Yunbai began. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "I come before this assembly to discuss the destruction of the human colony New Busan." Veltham waved one of his many arms. "Yes, a tragedy. The Concord has expressed its sympathy. We recommend that humanity improve its border defenses in the future." "I have evidence," Yunbai continued, "that the defense codes for New Busan were sold to the Varath Dominion by Trademaster Oryx of the Velahari." The chamber grew slightly quieter. Oryx, sitting in the Velahari section, shifted nervously in his seat. "I also have evidence," Yunbai said, "that the Galactic Concord knew of this transaction before the attack occurred, and that High Arbiter Veltham personally chose not to warn the colony. Now the chamber was silent. Velthamus' scales darkened with anger, but his voice remained calm. These are serious accusations, Ambassador. I trust you have proof, I do. Yunbai touched a device on her wrist. Holographic images filled the chamber. Documents, communications, bank. Records showing payments from the Vroth to Oryx messages. Between Concord officials discussing the human problem. Recording of Veltham himself saying, "Let it happen. They need to learn their place." The silence became absolute. For 50 years, Yunbai said, her soft voice somehow filling the entire chamber, humanity has followed your rules. We softened our words. We hid our strength. We smiled when you insulted us. We apologized for crimes we did not commit. We did everything you asked, hoping that one day you would see us as equals. She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate. You never did. To you, we were always just Deathworlders. Animals from a nightmare planet. Dangerous beasts that needed to be controlled. Her voice hardened. And when 2 million of our people died, you called it unfortunate and moved on with your day. Veltham stood from his throne. Ambassador, you will control your tone. The Concord does not respond to threats from lesser species. This is not a threat, Yunbai said. This is a notification. She straightened her back and spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. The United Earth Government formally declares war on the Vareth Dominion. Any species that provided aid, funding, or protection to those responsible for the massacre will be considered hostile. We will not negotiate. We will not accept surrender without justice. And we will not stop until every person responsible for the death of our people has answered for their crimes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then laughter began to spread through the chamber. The Varoth ambassador, a massive creature covered in armored plates, stood and pointed at the small human woman. He bellowed with amusement. You declare war on us? Little human, we have conquered 100 worlds. We have fleets beyond counting. You have what? A few dozen ships? We will crush you in days. Other delegates joined the laughter. The idea was absurd. Humans were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They had no allies. They had no real military power. What could they possibly do? Yunbai did not react to the laughter. She simply looked at her communication device and smiled. Admiral, she said quietly, you may begin. 300 light-years away, Admiral Kong Taeho received the message. He stood on the bridge of the UES Resolve, surrounded by officers who had waited their entire lives for this moment. Around him, the largest human fleet ever assembled hung in space, hidden behind a dead moon. All ships, Taeho said calmly. Execute Operation Remembrance. The fleet moved as one, in the great chamber. The laughter continued for another 30 seconds. Then the first reports arrived. 16 Vareth military stations had exploded simultaneously. The attacks came from nowhere. Human ships appeared, struck, and vanished before the Vroth could respond. The laughter stopped. More reports came flooding in. Human fleets were attacking across 3 sectors. Supply lines were being cut. Communication stations were being destroyed. The Vrath border was collapsing. The Vrath ambassador's face twisted with rage. Impossible. How did they move so fast? How did they know where to strike? Yunbai finally allowed herself to smile. You thought we spent 50 years doing nothing but apologizing? You were wrong. We spent 50 years learning, watching, preparing. We know every weakness in your defenses. We know every blind spot in your sensor networks. We know exactly where to hurt you most. She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber door. The Deathworlders are done playing nice, she said. Pray that you are not on our list. Across the galaxy, the war began in earnest. Captain Park Sora commanded the UES Vengeance, leading the first assault wave against Vareth territory. She was young for a captain, only 35 years old, with short black hair and eyes that burned with cold fire. Her parents had died on New Busan. Her brother had died on New Busan. She had nothing left but duty and revenge. Her ship tore through Vareth's defenses like they were made of paper. Human weapons, developed in secret for decades, proved far more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen. Human tactics, born from Earth's violent history, were brutal and effective. When a group of Wraith ships tried to flee, Sora let them go. She opened a communication channel that she knew they would hear. "I'll run," she said. "Run as fast as you can. Tell your people what you saw here today. Tell them that the monsters from the Death World are coming. Tell them we remember every name, every child, every innocent life they took." She paused, and her voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any scream. "Tell them we are just getting started." The fleeing ships carried her message across Vareth space. Within days, the entire Dominion knew the truth. The humans they had dismissed as weak, as tame, as broken, had been playing a role. The mask was off now, and behind the mask was something the galaxy had never seen before. Something angry, something patient, something that remembered everything and forgave nothing. The war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The planet was called Varath Prime, and it was a world of warriors. For 1,000 years, the Vareth had conquered other species from this place. Their soldiers were legends. Their generals were gods. No enemy had ever set foot on Varath Prime until the humans came. Sergeant Major Beak Seok was the first to touch the ground. He was not a large man by human standards, but to the aliens watching through their defense cameras, he looked like a demon from ancient nightmares. He wore a heavy armor painted black. He carried weapons that seemed too big for his frame, and he moved with a calm confidence that spoke of absolute certainty in his own ability to kill. Behind him came the Deathworld Marines, 100 humans against a garrison of 10,000 Varath warriors. The Varath commander laughed when he saw the numbers. "They send only 100. Are humans truly this stupid? We will tear them apart and eat their flesh." The first battle lasted for hours. When it ended, 3,000 Varath were dead. The humans had lost 11. The Varath commander could not understand. His soldiers were stronger than humans. They were faster. Their claws could tear through metal. Their scales could stop bullets. They were the ultimate predators in the galaxy, but they had never fought Deathworlders. The humans moved differently. They worked together like parts of a single machine. When one fell, others immediately filled the gap. They communicated without words, using hand signals and glances that carried more information than alien languages could express. And when they were wounded, they kept fighting. Injuries that would have killed any other species only seemed to make humans angrier. Beak Seok took a Varath claw through his shoulder during the second day of fighting. He looked at the wound, pulled out the claw, and used it to kill the Varath who had injured him. Then he continued leading his unit forward. The Varath soldiers began to experience something they had never felt before: fear. They were apex predators on their world. They had evolved at the top of the food chain. Nothing had ever hunted them. Nothing had ever made them feel like prey until now. The humans hunted them. The humans set traps. The humans used the dark and the terrain and the weather as weapons. The humans were patient and ruthless and absolutely relentless. No matter how many the Varath killed, more kept coming. By the 5th day, Varath soldiers were surrendering in groups of hundreds. They threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. The concept of surrender was shameful in Varath culture. It was considered worse than death. But when the alternative was facing the Deathworlders in combat, shame suddenly seemed acceptable. Beak Seok accepted their surrenders. He did not torture prisoners. He did not execute the helpless. He simply put them in camps and moved on to the next battle. This confused the galaxy more than anything else. Across human-controlled space, Dr. Yoon Hannah worked in her laboratory. She had become the head of Earth's xenobiology division, developing new ways to fight alien enemies. Other scientists wanted to create terrible weapons. Biological agents that could wipe out entire species. Diseases that could spread through enemy populations like fire. Hannah refused. "We are not them," she told her colleagues. We do not kill civilians. We do not commit genocide. We prove our superiority by winning with honor, not by becoming monsters. Instead, she developed targeted countermeasures. Compounds that neutralized the Vroth's natural armor. Gases that disrupted their enhanced senses. Nothing that caused permanent harm. Nothing that affected non-combatants. Weapons that won battles without staining human souls. High Arbiter Veltham watched the war from his chamber and felt something he had never experienced. Terror, the Vrath Dominion, which had seemed invincible just weeks ago, was collapsing. Human fleets moved through space with impossible speed. Human soldiers fought with impossible determination. Human scientists created weapons that seemed like magic, and humans were showing mercy. They were not destroying civilizations. They were not murdering prisoners. They were fighting a clean war, a war with rules, a war with honor. This terrified Veltham more than any atrocity would have. If humans had been cruel, he could have united the galaxy against them. He could have pointed to their brutality and called them monsters. But by showing restraint, by demonstrating that they were better than their enemies, humans were making the Concord look like the villains. Veltham began sending secret messages to other species. An alliance was needed. The humans must be stopped before they became too powerful. 12 species agreed to join him. They would combine their fleets. They would crush humanity with overwhelming numbers. Admiral Kung Taeho knew about the alliance before it was officially formed. Human intelligence networks had spread across the galaxy during those 50 years of pretending to be weak. Spies, listening posts, hacked communication systems. Humanity knew almost everything. They're forming a coalition, one of his officers reported. 12 species. Combined fleet strength approximately 50 times our own. Taeho nodded calmly. Good. His officers stared at him. Good, sir. They think this is our full strength. They think they know what we can do. They are wrong. He turned to the tactical display. Begin fortifying the Helion system. Activate all reserve production. Call back every ship on patrol duty. Hey, sir. If we consolidate our forces, we leave other systems undefended. The Vroth are already beaten. They just don't know it yet. Taeho's eyes were cold. Let the Concord come. Let them bring everything they have. We will show them what a death world truly creates. Meanwhile, Captain Park Sora had received special orders. Trademaster Oryx had been located hiding on a neutral station. She was to capture him alive. Her team moved through the station like ghosts. They disabled guards without killing them. They bypassed security systems. They found Oryx in a luxury suite surrounded by guards and treasures. The fight lasted 20 seconds. When it ended, every guard was unconscious, and Oryx was on his knees before Sora. Please, he begged, his many eyes filled with tears. I have money. More wealth than you can imagine. I can give you anything. Just let me go. Sora looked at him with eyes that held no mercy and no hatred. Just cold purpose. You sold 2 million people for profit, she said. Among them were children, babies, families who never harmed anyone. They trusted the galaxy to keep them safe, and you sold them to murderers. Oryx trembled. I didn't know. I didn't think they would kill everyone. You didn't care, Sora corrected. To you, they were just humans. Just animals from a death world. Their lives meant nothing to you. She pulled him to his feet. We'll stand trial. Every name will be read. Every face will be shown. And when the galaxy has heard what you did, you will be punished not by death, which would be too quick, but by being forced to live with what you've done. She dragged him toward the ship, and Oryx finally understood. The humans weren't going to kill him. They were going to make sure the entire galaxy knew exactly what kind of creature he was. That was somehow worse, scholar. Cathara's voice grew heavy as he continued his story. The young aliens listened in stunned silence. The story spread, he said. Tales of human soldiers who sang songs while marching into battle. Tales of human medics who saved wounded enemies. Tales of human commanders who accepted surrenders with dignity and treated prisoners with fairness. He shook his ancient head. But they were not the monsters in this story. We were. The Allied fleet was the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. 12 species had combined their forces under High Arbiter Veltham's command. 3,000 vessels of war, carrying millions of soldiers, stretched across space like an endless wall of metal and fire. Veltham stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Judgment, and smiled. The numbers were overwhelming. Human forces were outnumbered 50-1. There was no strategy, no trick, no amount of Deathworld determination that could overcome such odds. "Begin the approach to the Hellion system," he ordered. "Today we end the human threat forever." The fleet moved forward. Admiral Kong Taeho watched them come. He stood on the bridge of the UES Resolve, surrounded by officers who showed no fear. Behind him, the human defense fleet waited in formation. 60 ships against 3,000. It should have been hopeless. "They're entering the system, Admiral," Captain Park Sora reported from her position aboard the UES Vengeance. "Estimated contact in 40 minutes. Taeho nodded. "All ships, hold position." "Wait for my command." "Sir," one of his officers spoke carefully. "The crew would appreciate knowing the plan." "The plan?" Taeho allowed himself a small smile. "The plan is to make them regret every step they took toward the system." The Allied fleet crossed the outer boundary of Helion. The first trap activated. Hidden gravity wells, machines that humans had secretly built over decades, sprang to life. A dozen Allied ships were pulled out of formation, their engines unable to escape the artificial gravity. They crashed into each other and exploded. Veltham frowned. "Clever. But a few traps will not stop us. Continue forward." The fleet pressed on. More traps waited. Hidden minefields scattered through space, invisible until ships were already among them. Solar-powered beam arrays that fired from asteroids that had seemed lifeless. Automated defense platforms that emerged from hidden locations and attacked from every direction. 2 hours into the approach, the Allied fleet had lost 400 ships. They had not yet engaged a single human vessel. "This is impossible," a Velahari admiral protested. "How did they build all of this?" "We would have seen it." "You saw what we wanted you to see," came a human voice over the communication system. It was Taeho, his image appearing on every screen in the Allied fleet. "For 50 years you watched us. You spied on us. You thought you knew everything about human capabilities? You knew nothing." His image faded. The traps continued. By the time the Allied fleet reached human defensive positions, they had lost a third of their ships. Soldiers who had arrived confident now looked nervous. The humans they had dismissed as weak had hurt them badly. And the real battle had not even begun. "All ships," Taeho commanded. "Engage." The human fleet moved forward, and the galaxy learned what Deathworlders could truly do. Human ships were faster than their size suggested. Human weapons were more powerful than any intelligence had predicted. Human pilots flew with a precision that seemed inhuman, making maneuvers that should have been impossible, taking risks that should have been suicidal but somehow worked. And the human Marines, they boarded enemy ships across the battlefield. Small transport craft attached to Allied vessels like parasites. Marines in heavy armor cut their way inside and began fighting through corridors. The psychological effect was devastating. Allied soldiers were trained for space combat, not for fighting Deathworlders in close quarters. Many ships surrendered rather than face the boarding parties. 3 hours into the battle, the Allied fleet had lost 40% of its forces. Human losses were minimal. Velthium watched his coalition falling apart. The Velahari had already broken formation, their admiral deciding that survival was more important than victory. The Aurum were retreating. Even the fierce Krath were pulling back, their legendary courage crumbling before the human assault. "Hold formation," Veltham screamed. "We still outnumber them. We can still win." No one listened. Fear had taken hold. The myth of human weakness had been shattered, and in its place was a new understanding. Humans were not the galaxy's weakest species. They had never been weak. They had simply been waiting. On the EU's Vengeance, Captain Park Sora saw an opportunity. The Allied fleet was collapsing, but Veltham's flagship still fought. If the divine judgment fell, the battle would be over. Admiral, she contacted Tejo. I can reach the enemy flagship, but my ship has taken heavy damage. Engine power is failing. I won't be able to pull away after the attack. There was silence on the communication channel. Tejo understood what she was saying. She was asking permission to sacrifice herself. Sora, he said, his voice heavy. There has to be another way. There isn't. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. My family died on New Busan, my parents, my brother. I've been living on borrowed time since then, Admiral. Let me use that time for something that matters. Tejo closed his eyes. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to order her to stand down, but he knew she was right. The divine judgment was too well protected. A suicide run was the only way. Permission granted, Captain. And Sora, thank you. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. It's been an honor, sir. Tell the galaxy we died well. The UES Vengeance broke formation and accelerated toward the divine judgment. Allied ships tried to intercept, but Sora's crew had already evacuated. The ship was running on minimal systems. Every bit of remaining power directed to the engines. Veltham saw the approaching vessel and understood too late. All weapons destroy that ship. Fire poured toward the Vengeance. The ship shook and burned, sections exploding away into space. But it kept coming. It kept coming. For New Busan, Sora whispered. For the children. The Vengeance struck the divine judgment at full speed. The explosion was visible across the entire battlefield. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire that burned like a small sun. Veltham survived. His bridge crew had forced him into an escape pod moments before impact. He floated in space, watching the wreckage of his flagship, watching his coalition scatter and flee, watching everything he had built collapse around him. The battle was over. Humanity had won. On the bridge of the Resolve, Admiral Tejo stood in silence. The cheers of his crew faded as they noticed his expression. He was holding something in his hand, Sora's captain insignia, which she had left behind. Before transferring to the Vengeance for this final mission, sir, an officer approached carefully. The enemy fleet is in full retreat. Your orders? Let them run, Tejo said quietly. We're not butchers. The message has been sent. He looked down at the insignia in his hand. Such a small thing to represent such a great loss. Later, alone in his quarters, Kong Tejo allowed himself to grieve. He held the insignia and remembered the young officer he had watched grow into a legendary captain. He remembered her parents, her brother, the family she had lost on New Busan. He remembered her smile, her determination, her unwavering loyalty. She had died a hero. She had died winning the war, but she had still died, and no victory could bring her back. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty room. I'm sorry I couldn't find another way. He stayed there through the night, mourning not just Sora, but everyone they had lost. The 2 million on New Busan, the soldiers who had fallen in battle, the price of teaching the galaxy that Deathworlders were not to be underestimated. When morning came, he put the insignia in a case near his heart. Then he returned to the bridge, his face calm, his eyes cold, ready to finish what humanity had started. The war was almost over. Justice was almost done, but the cost had been higher than anyone should ever have to pay. The Wrath Dominion surrendered 3 weeks after the ELD Battle of Helion Gate. Their worlds burned with rebellion. Their soldiers refused to fight. Their leaders begged for mercy they had never shown others. Admiral Kang Taho received their surrender aboard the UES Resolve. The Wrath Supreme Commander, a massive creature covered in battle scars, knelt before him and offered his ceremonial blade. We accept your terms, the commander said. Unconditional surrender. Do what you will with us. Tejo looked at the blade but did not take it. Stand up, he said. We do not require you to kneel. The commander seemed confused. But we have lost. We are yours to destroy. Yes, you have lost. And yes, we could destroy you. Tejo's voice was cold, but not cruel. But we choose not to. Those who committed crimes against humanity will face trial. Those who are only soldiers, following orders, will be allowed to return to their lives. We do not punish entire species for the actions of their leaders. Oh, the commander stared at him for a long moment. Why? He finally asked. After what we did to your colony, after 2 million dead, you show mercy? I do not understand. Tejo thought of Sora, of her sacrifice, of the insignia he still carried near his heart. Because that is what separates us from you. We remember our dead by being worthy of their memory, not by creating more dead to join them. The terms of surrender were harsh but fair. War criminals would be tried. Reparations would be paid to the families of victims. The Varath military would be reduced and monitored. But there would be no extinction, no collective punishment, no revenge beyond justice. The galaxy watched in amazement. They had expected human fury. They had expected genocide. They had expected to witness the Varath erased from existence. Instead, they witnessed something they had never seen before. Mercy that came from strength, not weakness. The trial of Trademaster Oryx was broadcast across every inhabited world. He sat in a small chair, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, facing judges from a dozen species. The proceedings lasted for weeks. On the first day, the names of the dead began to be read. Every person who had died on New Busan, every man, every woman, every child. The reading took 11 days. 11 days of names, faces, stories. 11 days of remembering the people Oryx had sold for profit. When it was finished, Oryx was a broken creature. He had tried to look away during the reading, but the judges forced him to watch. He saw the 7-year-old girl who loved to paint. He saw the 4-year-old boy who wanted to be a pilot. He saw Dr. Yoon Hana's husband, who taught music to children. He saw them all. "How do you plead?" the head judge asked. "Guilty," Oryx whispered. He could no longer look at anyone. He could no longer pretend he had done nothing wrong. Guilty of everything, he was sentenced to life imprisonment on a human penal colony. The planet was a high-gravity world, similar to Earth. Every moment of his existence, he would feel the weight of a death world pressing down on him. Every breath would be a struggle. Every step would be exhausting. He would live, but he would never forget. High Arbiter Veltham faced a different fate. His own people removed him from power before humans could demand it. The Concord restructured itself, creating a new council where every species, including humanity, had an equal voice. Velthium spent his final years in exile, watching the galaxy change without him. He wrote memoirs that tried to justify his actions. No one read them. He died alone, remembered only as the fool who had awakened the Deathworlders. On the ruins of New Busan, humanity built a monument. It covered an entire mountain, carved with the name of every person who had died in the massacre. At its center stood a statue of a mother holding her child, looking up at the stars with hope. Dr. Yoon Hana attended the memorial ceremony. She walked among the names until she found her family, her husband, her daughter, her son. She touched the stone where their names were carved and finally allowed herself to cry. Admiral Kong Tae-ho stood beside her, saying nothing. There were no words that could heal such wounds. There was only presence and time, and the slow work of learning to live with loss. "They're remembered," he said finally. "Not just here, but across the entire galaxy. Your children's names are known to every species in existence. They will never be forgotten." Hannah wiped her tears. "Is that enough?" she asked. "Is remembrance enough?" Tae-ho thought for a long moment. "No," he admitted. "It will never be enough. But it is what we can give them, and we will make sure it lasts forever." A new ship class was commissioned and named in honor of Captain Park Sora, the Sora class. Battle cruisers were the finest vessels humanity had ever built. Fast, powerful, and beautiful. The first ship of the class was named U.S. Park Sora, Sergeant Major Beak Seok. Requested command of the new ship's Marine detachment. His request was granted without hesitation. He would spend the rest of his career aboard that ship, protecting the galaxy that had once despised his people. Humanity did not seek to dominate the stars. They did not become conquerors. They became guardians. Trade agreements were renegotiated fairly. Colonial species received protection. Weak species found allies. And every species in the galaxy learned one lesson they would never forget. Humans could endure anything. Humans could forgive much. But humans never forgot harm done to their own. The Old Scholar. Cathara finished his tale as the purple sky darkened toward night. The young aliens sat in silence, their eyes wide with understanding. What happened to the humans? One young creature finally asked. Are they still out there? Cathara nodded slowly. They watch over us still. When there is danger, when there is injustice, when the weak are threatened by the strong, the humans come. Are they as scary as the stories say? The Old Scholar laughed, a dry and ancient sound. Scary? Perhaps. But that is not what makes them remarkable. He gestured toward the stars that were beginning to appear. What makes humans remarkable is how hard they tried not to be scary. For 50 years, they hid their strength. They smiled at insults. They endured hatred. They gave us every chance to treat them fairly. His voice grew heavy with shame. We didn't. We pushed them. We betrayed them. We murdered their children and called it politics. And when the Deathworlders stopped playing nice... He fell silent, staring at the stars. What happened? The young alien pressed. We learned, Cathara said simply. We learned that the most dangerous creature in the galaxy is not the one that attacks first. It is the one that forgives until it cannot anymore. He looked at his young audience with ancient, tired eyes. The humans forgave us in the end. They rebuilt the galaxy instead of destroying it. They showed mercy when they had every right to show none. They proved that they were better than us in every way that mattered. He stood slowly, his old bones creaking. Remember this story, young ones? Remember what our arrogance cost us. Remember what human restraint saved us from. And if you ever meet a human, treat them with the respect they deserve. He began to walk away, then paused, because they remember everything. They forgive much, but they never, ever forget. The young aliens watched him go, their minds full of images of burning colonies and impossible battles and a small captain flying her ship into the heart of an enemy fleet. They would carry this story forward. They would tell their children and their children's children and across the galaxy. Humanity continued to watch over the stars they had won with blood and sacrifice. They remembered their dead. They honored their heroes. They protected the weak. They were Deathworlders. They were guardians. They were legend, and the galaxy would never forget.